On today's episode, Betsy Kerekes from the Ruth Institute reveals the secret to a happier marriage and joyful parenting. In this segment, discover how a fulfilling relationship can lead to a happier family life. Learn from the insights shared in Be a Happier Parent or Laugh Trying, and uncover 101 tips for enhancing your marriage. Tune in for practical advice for creating a loving and supportive home environment.
How to have a happier marriage and be a more joyful parent. As you all are your moms, you probably have noticed that once you have children, all the rules of normal civilization go out the window once you bring a baby into your home. They do things that normal people do not do, like just throw up their food on you with wild abandon and have no concern whatsoever. Or it'll come out the other end and they don't even notice or care. So I was going to share with you the story of when I was at Mass at this lovely cathedral, because it was my friend's daughter's baptism. And so I came with my baby girl at this beautiful cathedral with the vaulted ceilings and the stained glass windows. And at the most quiet part of the Mass, the most solemn part of the Mass, she starts audibly filling her diaper, to the point where there were people several rows ahead who were turning around and looking. And I think it's just going to be like a quick thing and she'll be done, but she was not done. So then I had to do the mom walk of shame, trying to get out the aisle with my child as she's motorboating her way. And then I'm walking fast to get down the aisle, and of course the motorboat turns into a speedboat and everyone is staring at us as she's just doing her thing. And there was another time, I think it was when my son was born, and I needed to find a Mass that I could get to. You know, I just had the baby. There's no way I'm going to our usual 8:30 Mass. So I found a church that had an 11 o'clock Mass. I'm like, okay, I can do that. It wasn't the church that I normally would go to, so I wasn't as familiar with the layout, but I was in the pew, and he was sleeping all through Mass until toward the end when he woke up, and I thought, okay, he's going to be hungry and he's going to start crying. So I pick him up, walk of shame, down the aisle, except it's not shame, of course, and he needs to nurse, and I have no problem with people nursing in public, but I know that other people do, and I didn't want to be a distraction, so I'm looking around, and it was like a beam of light was shining down on this folding chair in the back corner of the church. I'm like, thank you, Jesus. So I walked over there, I sat down, I started nursing, everything was great, and then Mass ended. And little did I know, because I wasn't familiar with this church, that there was an exit door right next to me, and I had missed seeing that. So everyone starts filing past me, and I'm like, do I look at them and smile? Do I look down? Do I pretend I'm not here? Do I pull his little hand out and wave as they walk by? I didn't know what to do, so I was kind of doing a combination of, whatever. So much for being discreet. And I told my sister this story, and she's like, okay, so one time I was at the zoo, and I needed to nurse my baby, and there was a bench, and nobody was around. So she was like, again, perfect. So she sits down and is nursing, and then suddenly people start gathering in front of her, smiling, pointing, pulling out their cameras. And little did she know that the lion had just woken up, and it had come out of his enclosure and was prowling around and yawning real wide, and everyone was like acting like it was Halley's Comet coming around once in a generation for all the excitement that they had. And she was like, I couldn't even get out because the press of people was so excited about the lion. And I was like, how do parents without a sense of humor survive? Like, how do you even manage? And she said, they just don't. You just don't. So the first lesson I learned was you have to keep a sense of humor when you're a parent, because these kids do whatever they want. They do not care about you and your social standing or anything like that. So there are so many times when I feel like you want to just cry because of the insanity of the situation, but laughing is just so much easier. And when I was in the thick of it with my children when they were all little, when my third was born, my oldest was 4. So they were pretty close in age. Although I know a woman who had twins, and then a year later had twins again. And the children are now in high school, so they did survive, and she's still alive, so somehow she survived too, but that was nuts. But I remember thinking, this is for sure the hardest job in the world. I'm like President Schmesident. I'd like to see him deal with a child who's throwing applesauce from her high chair all over, getting it onto the carpet of the next room, and another kid crying because of a boo-boo, and another kid who was just wet himself, and then the baby upstairs crying, having just woken up from a nap. Like, negotiating world peace is nothing to dealing with being a mom. So, it's a tough gig for sure. So I always try to start the day with a prayer. Usually it's, okay, Lord, thank you for this day. Please help me to use it to your good and do whatever it is that you want me to do today. But usually it comes out as, please tell me I remembered to set the coffee maker last night. That's really the reality of it, but I try to do both. So I try to have one big goal of cleaning each day that's beyond just keeping my children alive, because really in the thick of it, I just want them to stay alive to the end of the day. So I have my priorities, and it's not going to be clean the whole house, vacuum the whole house, dust, everything. It's just, that was never going to be a possibility. So I would say, okay, I'm just going to dust this room, and then I'll vacuum this room the next day, and the vacuum just kind of moves from room to room, day to day, because I can only handle one room at a time. But one morning, my goal was, I'm going to clean this bathroom mirror, because the spots on the mirror have been driving me nuts for quite a while, and I thought, finally, I'm going to clean this mirror. So I did the poor woman's version of cleaning, where I just turn on the faucet and I flick my hands in the water, and the spots go on the mirror, and then I dry them off with a hand towel, and it works great. So I did that. And I felt like I could destroy asteroids with my bare hands after I had accomplished cleaning the bathroom mirror, because I was in the thick of things and I was tired. So having gotten that done was like the greatest thing ever. Now later in the day, my children are outside playing, and then they come inside and I hear them in the bathroom, and I hear them laughing and giggling, and I'm like, well, laughter is generally okay. Like 60% of the time, laughter is a good sign. So I liked those odds. I was going to just let it go. It's not crying, so I didn't have to intervene. I let it go. And then later I go into the bathroom and I see, you guessed it, water spots all over my freshly cleaned mirror that I had been so proud of myself for having cleaned. Same day, we're talking like 2-3 hours later. That's how long my clean mirror lasted. So I asked my children, okay, what happened in here? And the girls, I had 3 girls and then a boy, and the girls told me, well, little Joe, he was a toddler at the time, his hands and feet were dirty from playing outside, so we cleaned him up, and he was splashing in the water, and it got everywhere. And I thought, okay, my girls were being so responsible in cleaning up their little brother without me even asking them to, and he had fun, and they were all just laughing together. So instead of being upset that my freshly cleaned mirror was now a mess again, I realized if I hadn't washed it that morning, I wouldn't have noticed that there were new water spots. And so the water spots reminded me that my children had been responsible and that they had this fun bonding moment. So I decided I'm going to leave those water spots because they were a happy reminder. Until, a couple weeks later, and I'm like, all right, that's enough. Anyhow, so the moral of that story is find the good. Find the good in the craziness. And then, of course, when your kids are a little bit older and they're able to do chores for themselves, that's great. The hard part is getting the kids to do the chores and being willing to fight that battle with them to get them to initially do so. But the beauty of giving children chores is it helps them to feel like they're a part of the family. They're contributing to the overall household of getting stuff done. Also, there was a study that showed that kids who do chores have a greater concern for others, which I think is really cool, and we definitely want to establish that in them. And it also improves their self-esteem by giving them a task that they're able to complete. And so, of course, you want to start out with something that they're able to do, and then you want to up the ante just a little bit just to make it seem like a challenge, because then when they complete that task, they have healthy self-esteem and a healthy form of pride for having gotten something done. When you tell your kids to do something, don't end it with okay. Because when you say something like, we're going to leave the park in 5 minutes, okay? When you say that with a question mark, the kids think, oh, so there's an option there. I could think not okay. But what you really mean to say is, do you understand? So you say, we're leaving in 5 minutes. You're going to need to start thinking about picking up your toys. Do you understand? And then they look at you and they can nod. And you can also have them say, say yes, mommy, or yes, daddy. That way, they can't deny that they heard your request. So if it's like, go clean your room, do you understand what I'm asking? And they say yes, mommy. And then 5 minutes later, they're like just playing on the floor and everything is destroyed around them. And then you say, I did ask you to clean your room, right? And they're like, oh, I didn't hear. And then you can say, well, you did say yes, mommy, so I know that you heard. You can also avoid nagging your children by saying as little as possible when you want them to do something. Like putting your shoes away when you get home. They all know they've got to put their shoes where they belong. So if a child has left their shoes in the middle of the floor, rather than saying, hey, you forgot to put your shoes away, go put your shoes away, you can just say that child's name and then kind of like do one of these, looking down at it, or give a little toe tap, and then they know what they're supposed to do, and they just like, oh, right, yeah. And then they'll go do it. Or you can, if they left the door open, you don't have to say, hey, go shut the door. You can just say, Joe, the door is still open. And then he'll be like, oh, right, yeah. So you're not really telling them to do something, so then they're not kind of feeling belittled or like you're nagging them and always telling them to do something. I have also had good luck whispering a task to my son, because then it feels like it's like a little, secretive thing. So, for instance, we can all be, the whole family might be in the living room at bedtime for him, and I'll say, hey, Joe, how about you go get your pajamas on and come back and we'll see if anybody notices. He'll be like, oh, okay, and he'll run and he'll get his jams on and he'll come back and he'll look around and see, and I'll have prepped people to be like impressed, like, oh, look, you got your pajamas on without us even knowing. And then it's kind of a matter of, next the battle is getting the teeth brushed. So then my husband, who is fond of this child who's into competition, can always be like, all right, I'm going to race you down the hallway. Who's going to get to the bathroom first? And so, my son will like come careening down the hallway because no way dad's going to beat him to the bathroom. And he's not always great about having his teeth brushed, so a little trick that I do that has been helpful is his mouth is tight shut, and I'll be like, how am I going to look for the elephants in your teeth if you won't open your mouth? And then I'll do a little singy song like 1 little, 2 little, 3 little purple elephants hula hooping in JoJo's mouth, and it's something ridiculous each time. And so every night he's like, okay, so what's going to be in there tonight? And it has become a game, and sometimes they'll say, what would you like me to count in your mouth today? And since he has discovered Mario Brothers, it'll be like Bowser, and I'll be brushing and then I'll hear Yoshi, around his toothbrush. And that has been a great relief for me. And his teeth get cleaned. I'll also sing while giving a bath or sing while washing hands. And if you make it like an alphabet song or a number song, then it has the added benefit of being educational. So you can do that. And I'm sure you guys with the little kids know trying to get your kids to eat something is a pain. So my son, we'd give him frozen peas. I don't know if you've discovered, like in the Cheerio phase, frozen blueberries are a win, and also frozen peas. I learned this from my brother and sister-in-law. They have 9, 10 kids. I've kind of lost count. But for all 4 of my kids, they will eat the frozen peas. Somehow I can get that into them. But when my son got a little bit older and the novelty had worn off a bit for him, we use these little construction vehicles. So he's got like the excavator and the dump truck, and we put those on his high chair tray. And so he plays with them. He'll scoop them up with the whatever this thing, the big scoop, and then he'll put them in the dump truck, and then he'll drive it to the front, and he'll dump it in his mouth. And so he's eating his vegetables. So if you have those little toys, that helps. It's for boys, maybe for girls too. You can try. The greatest tool in the toddler child's arsenal that I have found is a glider or a rocking chair. When they get to that point, that purgative stage where they're not napping anymore, but they still get really tired and they're too awake to fall asleep, but they're too tired to really function, and they're just kind of cranky and they don't really know why. They're just out of sorts and they can't figure it out, and so they're just whiny and cranky. I will scoop that crying child up and I'll take him into his room, wherever the glider is, and I'll keep the lights off, I'll close the curtains, I'll grab his blanket and his bear, and I'll get in the chair with him and I'll just rock, and he will eventually quiet down. And then I'll wait a minute, and then I'll say, do you want to go back out now? And usually he says yes, but sometimes he'll be like, no, not yet. And so I'll wait another minute or 2, and then I'll ask him again, are you ready to go back out now? And then he says yes, and he goes out running, and he's happy, and he's playing again. And my husband witnessed this one time, and he's like, what wizardry was that? Because it was a total 180 from how he was initially, and I'm just like, oh, you don't know that trick? Oh. And the other thing that my husband called me a wizard for was bee sting. He stepped in his shoe and there was a bee in it, and so he got a bee sting. And do you guys know the trick with the baking soda and the water, and you make a little paste? So this works magically. So you just get a little bowl and you throw like a teaspoon of baking soda in and a few drops of water, and you mix it together with your finger, and it forms this paste, and you stick it on the spot, and it sucks the sting out immediately. So I did that for my husband, and he was like, what is this? So keep that in mind. It's instant. You just have to get your child through the crying for like the 30 or 40 seconds it takes you to make that, and then it dries and flakes off, and it's super simple. So remember, bee sting, baking soda. That's how help you remember that. You guys might know the crayon trick. If you have a really cranky kid, you just pull out a box of crayons and some paper and say, show me how you feel. And you might grab a black crayon and just all over the paper, and you give him another paper and all over the paper, and he might go through 4 or 5 sheets of paper, and then by the end of it, he's like, it helps. It really does help. So you can try that. Sometimes these tricks only last for so long, so use them sparingly as you need them. You guys may have had the experience where you take your kids someplace fun. Like some friends of mine took their kids to Disneyland, and afterward the kids were just so crabby and so cranky, and they were just whiny. And the parents were like, why do we even bring you if this is the way you're going to behave? You're so ungrateful. And I learned from taking my kids to the pumpkin patch every year, it was the same thing. They'd have so much fun, and then it was time to go. They were just like awful. And my husband and I had the same reaction. You're being so ungrateful for this fun thing that we did with you. And then I finally came to realize that it wasn't that they were ungrateful. They were just sad that they had to leave. It was just a matter of they didn't want to go because they were having so much fun. And I was like, well, duh. And what children need is for us to acknowledge their feelings. That's key. So I changed things around and said, you're really sad that we have to leave, aren't you? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, you wish that we could stay and you can keep playing? And they're like, yeah. And I said, well, I understand, but I bet you're getting hungry for dinner now. And they're like, yeah. And I said, well, those people who work at the pumpkin patch, they're probably getting hungry for dinner too. And they're like, oh, okay. And I said, well, they can't go home and eat until we all leave. And so then they're like, oh, okay. And so they stopped crying because they felt empathy. I was establishing empathy for them, and also I was acknowledging what they were actually upset about. And that was a major turnaround for them once I finally clued into what was really going on there. Of course, you guys know that you need to teach your children manners. And you have to be careful about how you go about doing that. You have to be very clear. We had this lovely old lady who was our next door neighbor, and we have a lemon tree, so we would occasionally take lemons to her house. And I sent my daughter over, and worried that my daughter wouldn't say, you're welcome afterward, I said, don't forget to say you're welcome. So I watched out the window. She trots over, knocks on the door, and the lady opens it. And my daughter handed her the bag and everything, and then she came back, and I'm like, so how did it go? And she said, well, I knocked on the door, and the lady opened it, and I handed her the bag and said, you're welcome, and then came home again. I'm like, I should have been clear about a few steps in there. You wait for her to say thank you, and then you say you're welcome. So just be sure that you're clear when you're teaching good manners. I love to be silly with my kids. I have been reading to my children since they were so young. And I was reading a book to my daughter about cats. And I like to interject things just to make it even more fun. So I was reading this little book, and it said, cats are fun and playful. And I said, just like Mama. And then it was, cats are beautiful and smart. So of course I added, just like Mama. And then my husband walks into the room and said, cats are furry and they poop everywhere. And my daughter said, just like Mama. I was like, thank you, honey. So now I want to tell you guys about how we can inadvertently teach our children to lie. And it has to do with how we react when things go wrong. So imagine that you're potty training. And I feel like you guys probably shuddered a little inside when I said that, because potty training is just the absolute worst. When I found out I was pregnant with my son, my first thought was, I'm going to have to potty train another child. I hate that part. So imagine that you've just mostly successfully potty trained a child, and you ask your child, do you need to go potty? Because there's no longer diapers in the equation. And they're like, no, I'm good. And you're like, they look like they might need to go potty. So you ask again, are you sure you don't need to go potty? And they say, no, I'm fine. And then a minute or two later, they've done something in their clothes. And your reaction might be, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you did that. We're out and about and you've ruined your clothes, and what a mess you've made, and why didn't you tell me you had to go? I kept asking. You said you didn't have to go, and clearly you had to go, and now look at what you've done. So what can ultimately happen from that is, next time your child makes a mistake and does something, and you say, did you do this? They might be like, nope, not me, because they don't want to see that reaction from you again. So it's important that we remain calm, which, depending on how sleep deprived you are, could be a tricky balance. But make sure that you can keep your cool, so that in the future, if your child makes a mistake, breaks the lamp or something, and you're like, did you break the lamp? And they might be like, yeah, I'm sorry. I know I wasn't supposed to be throwing the ball in the house, but I did, and I shouldn't have. And you can just be like, okay, well, this is coming out of your allowance, and you got to clean up the mess, and things will go more smoothly for you. Something that my mom used to do for me when I was little and I'd run into the wall and stub my toe and I'd be crying because it hurt, is she would admonish the wall. She would say, bad wall, how dare you hurt my daughter's toe? Shame on you, wall. And it was ridiculous, and it would make me laugh. So that really helped calm me down when I was a child. I'd also tell my kids that every minute that passes gets them closer to feeling well again, closer to the pain going away. Every second your body is healing. While I am talking to you right now, your body is healing and the pain is getting closer and closer to going away. That actually has helped them calm down. A friend of mine said the first step to being a good parent is getting off the couch. Just get up off the couch and go to your children and get down on the floor with them and enter into their world and just play with them. Because to a child, love is spelled T-I-M-E. Spend time with your child. That sister-in-law I mentioned who has all the kids, she noticed that one of her daughters was really quiet and was acting pretty melancholic. And so she asked her, is everything okay? And of course the daughter said, oh no, I'm fine. And when a girl says she's fine at any age, it means that she's not fine. So this savvy mom said, you know what, I need to go shopping. I want to go buy some shoes. Do you want to come with me, just you? And the girl was like, okay. And so she left all the other kids at home with her husband, and she went shoe shopping just with this girl, or whatever shopping it was. And then when they came home, the daughter was back to herself. She was a middle child. She just needed some one-on-one time with mom to feel special and loved again. So if you ever notice that one of your kids is acting kind of out of sorts, then try to do some one-on-one. Just take that child out for breakfast. And maybe it can be dad taking the boys, or you can take turns. So if you ever notice that in the future, check in on your kids individually every now and then and make sure that they're doing all right. Another good thing to do for instilling virtues in your kids is when they do something helpful or when they do something kind, your first reaction might be to say, that was really helpful, or that was really kind of you. But what you can say instead that's even better is, you're a helpful child, or you're a kind child, or you're so patient. Not you were patient, but you are patient. The reason why it's good to get in the habit of doing that is then they internalize, not, okay, that was a one-off good thing that I did, but I am that thing. Then it becomes more instinctual, and you can build virtue in your children that way. I recommend giving your kids books about saints as they get older, and they can read, or you can read them stories about saints. St. John Vianney's mom, Marie Vianney, taught her kids about Jesus and Mary from birth. She was always talking to them about God. When they woke up in the morning, she would remind them of Jesus. Before they went to bed at night, she would remind them about Jesus and tell them how much God loves them. So after having read that, whenever I would carry my baby Joe out of the bedroom where I had this Franciscan cross from San Damiano that my husband bought for me when we were in Assisi. You guys can appreciate that being here at St. Francis of Assisi Parish. So whenever I would carry him out of the room, I would point to the cross and I'd tell him, Jesus, this is Jesus. And he would grab a hold of it and he'd scrape it against the wall, and it was scraping the paint. And I thought, someday, years from now, when he's older, grown up and out of the house, and maybe we'll be moving someday, and I'll take that cross down from the wall and I'll see the paint scratches, and I'll think, that's going to bring down our resale value. I also recommend naming children after saints. Somebody had told me once that it isn't that we choose saint names for our children, it's that the saints are choosing our children to be the patron. I thought that's a nice sentiment, but who knows? That's just a nice thought. And a friend of mine told me about when she had her daughter, she was planning on naming her daughter Anne. But when the baby came out, she looked at her and said, "This is an Emily." Her mom said to her, "You can't name your daughter Emily. There's no Saint Emily." And the friend said, "I'm sorry, but I can just tell that this is an Emily." So a few days later, the mom was looking in a saint book, and she found that there is actually a Saint Emily, and her feast day was the day that this baby Emily was born. And I thought, that is so cool. So when I have a special need for any of my kids, I'm specifically asking their patron saint, please help this child out. And when we do family prayers, we end it by doing our own litany of saints, our oldest to youngest. We'll do our first name saints, pray for us. Everyone says pray for us. And if you're feeling ambitious, you can do the middle name saints and have them all pray for you so that they're always on the job. You want your saints working for you. Another good Catholic life hack that I have learned is Jesus loves little children. We know this from the Gospels, right? He's always saying, let the little children come to me. So your children are so sweet and innocent, and God loves them so much that I use that to my advantage, but in a good, holy Catholic way, okay? There was this one time that I had my 3 little girls, like I said, really close in age, and I had gone grocery shopping with them. I put the groceries in the trunk and the kids in the back, not the other way around. Learn from your mistakes. And the car wouldn't start. So I turned the key again, nothing. I turned the key a 3rd time, nothing. So I turned around and said to my girls, will you please say, Jesus, please help the car start? So they did. And I'm like, deep breath, and I turned the key and the car started. It was a great teachable moment. I said, look, girls, look what happened. See how much Jesus loves you, that he answered your prayers, and now we can get home, and that ice cream won't melt, because I think that Jesus loves ice cream as much as I do, because he gave us ice cream, and it was mint chocolate chip, okay? So I recommend, whenever you can, being spontaneous with your children. Every once in a while, just drop the strict bedtime schedule, leave the dishes in the sink, tell your kids, grab your shoes and coat, we're going to go on a hike, or we're going to go to the park, or we're going to go out to eat, or every once in a while, just make pancakes for dinner, just to break the routine and do something spontaneous and fun. Make s'mores in the backyard. If you don't have a fire pit, then maybe in your fireplace. If you don't have a fireplace, if you have a gas stove, and you make s'mores in your kitchen over the gas stove. It's silly, and it isn't something that is normally done, but that's the sort of thing that your kids will remember. You guys probably don't remember a whole lot from your childhood. I don't remember very much from my childhood, but you have the overall impression of it being a good childhood or maybe a not so great childhood. But you want your children to grow up remembering that they had fun, and that their parents were fun, and that they did unique, fun things. And on the whole, you will have done a good job. You'll have made good memories for them. One more thing I'll say about that is I have friends in Buffalo who decided one summer, instead of going on a vacation, they were going to do a staycation. And they had their big homeschooling whiteboard, and they clipped $1,000 in cash to the top of the whiteboard and said, we will spend this money and you get to decide what we're going to do. So they all had their section on the whiteboard, and they wrote down what they wanted to do. And so they did something called geocaching, which I don't know what that is, but they would go to the park, they would get to watch the family movie, One thing that they particularly enjoyed was they went to the grocery store and got all the stuff from the frozen food, the tater tots, the fish sticks, the French fries. Each one of them got to pick out their own carton of ice cream. They have 7 kids, 7 cartons of ice cream. And then my friend, the dad, told me that there was some lady at the grocery store who's like, you could just go take your kids to Baskin Robbins and they can get ice cream there. And he said, yeah, but I can spend $5 on a tiny cup of ice cream, or they can each get their own carton of ice cream. And she's like, okay, yeah. So they just had a blast. And it was also a good math lesson because they kept track of how much everything would cost. And then they could weigh the pros and cons of different things based on how much money they had left. That is a good memory that is going to carry for them. You want your kids to be happy, of course. You want them to have a good childhood. A study was done that found that happy parents have happy kids. That seems logical, of course, that miserable, unhappy parents would have miserable, unhappy kids. If my kids were unhappy, it would make me unhappy, and the cycle would just continue. That's why there's an entire chapter in my parenting book, which I don't suppose you can grab from my bag, called Having Fun with Your Kids, Having Fun with Children, Even Your Own. All right? But, thank you. On the whole, the best way for your kids to be happy is for you to have a happy marriage. So now I'm segueing into my other book. So before I even had to say anything, she starts turning around to go get the other book. That was awesome. Okay, so you are all married, I assume, and so your vocation to marriage is your unique path to holiness, your unique key to getting to heaven. Thank you so much. Here's my first book, Be a Happier Parent or Laugh Trying. It is chock full of, yes, advice. It's like 60% advice, 40% humor, because I envision this for moms who are deep in the trenches like I was. I had a baby when I had, a deadline, and I'm like, why am I doing this? But it was fun. I envisioned this for other moms who were where I was, where at the end of the day, when you're finally get your kids to bed and you just sit back on the couch and you can relax and you read something funny. So this is all the stories of the crazy things that my kids have done and some other friends' kids. And I forgot to mention, keep a notebook of the silly things and the crazy things that happen. If you can find the time to take a minute to write down the ridiculous things that happened that day. I did that, and now that my kids are a little older, when I pull that notebook out and I share these stories, they love it. Also, you have ammunition for the day that they get married, and you can share these stories, and it's like payback time. So that's this book. Now I'm going to talk about 101 tips for a happier marriage. As I said, loving your spouse is your unique path to holiness. You take vows for a reason. Generations ago, somebody figured out that marriage is hard. In the movies, when they meet, there's a falling out, but they get back together and everything is great and happily ever after. But they stop the movie there and they never go 7 years later, 3 kids in, and all the chaos of the home. They don't show that to you. Things get rough. And that's why we take vows, because we need to promise each other in front of God, in front of our friends and family, that we are going to be together through thick and thin. Something that sometimes happens is you spend the years with your children being so focused on the kids and all of the appointments and the play dates and the sports and the practices and the doctor's appointments. Your whole lives are consumed with taking care of your children to the point where that's all that you talk about anymore. And then by the time the kids leave the house, you look at your spouse and you think, I don't even know you anymore, because you have focused so much of your time on your children. So I recommend having 2 indoor and 2 outdoor activities that you enjoy doing with your spouse. And you've already heard you've got to keep dating each other after you're married. I recommend that also, just so that you stay connected. Don't drift apart. Still go out and do things. Of course, when you're out on your date night and you finally get away from your kids, you're going to be tempted to talk about the kids. So I would say set a timer, or have the rule be until the appetizers arrive. Once the appetizers are here, then we have to talk about adult things only, so that you stay connected always. You can also talk about childhood memories that you've never told your spouse. Perhaps they've forgotten because mama brain. They may have forgotten things, or talk about your memories from when you were dating, or maybe if you have love notes that you shared from those days, you want to pull those out, especially if things have been a little bit rough lately. Things happen. I'm sure you guys know this. You can also have this be your marriage meeting where you can say, how are we doing? How are you and I doing? Is there anything that I did this week that bothered you? Is there anything that I can do better? It's also a great time to tell your spouse something great that they did do for you and something that you appreciate from them, and let them know then. Don't forget to tell your spouse that you appreciate him or her for all the things that they do. My husband is great about finishing off the leftovers that nobody else wants to eat. I'm so appreciative that he does that, so I want to make a point of telling him that. Or if the other person gets up to help a child first, or notices that your coffee is low and gets you more coffee. Remember St. Therese in her little way when she saw that her dad was outside working in the garden, and she thought, I bet he could use a glass of water, so she brought him a glass of water, and he was like, that was so great, thank you so much. And she had this epiphany of, wow, that was so easy. I can do little things with great love. We can be doing that with our spouse. If you notice that your husband's water is low at dinner time, just get up before he has to get up. Find ways that you can do things for your spouse. Anticipate your spouse's needs whenever possible. I also like to hide cards under my husband's pillow. For no apparent reason, I will just find this cutesy, ridiculous card and I'll stick it under his pillow. He sleeps with his arm under the pillow, so I always know that the lights go off, and like 3-5 seconds later, he'll be like, what? And the lights will turn back on again, which is great that he does it so quickly so your eyes haven't adjusted and you're not blinded by the lights turning back on again. So he'll open it up, and it's just, I do this like once every 3 years maybe. I should probably do it more, but he never knows when it's coming, so it's great. Always leaving the love notes in your husband's lunch. Pretend you didn't hear that, the token husband here, so that you'll be surprised. And in his briefcase or wherever. I know this lady she'd make her husband sandwich and she'd take a little bite out of it. So when he's at work and in lunch and he pulls it out and there's a little bite missing, and he's like, oh, my cute wife. Other things that you can do. My husband and I have these things that are like inside jokes for us, but I will let them be outside for you. You probably send texts that say love you to each other throughout the day. And so my husband and I would do that, and then the response would sometimes be you too, and then that got shortened to just the letter U and the number 2, and then next it would be Bono, from the band U2, and then it was the Edge. So sometimes just middle of the day I'll get a text that simply says Dave Matthews, and I'll respond Taylor Swift. Anybody who sees that light up on his phone is going to be like, what is going on? And he's like, oh, my wife loves me. She's just letting me know that she loves me. Super bizarre. We'll also send a happy birthday text on the time equivalent of our birthdays. So my birthday is September 10th, so 9/10. I'll get a text on my phone that says happy birthday, and the balloons go up. So for him, October 14th, I'll say happy birthday, or maybe I'll change it up and say happy new year, and then the fireworks go off. One time I had my phone still open, and he sent Happy Chinese New Year, and if you guys have iPhones, then total explosions, and it made me jump one time, and it could have given me a heart attack, but he was just letting me know that he loves me in his own unique way. You guys may remember the 5 Love Languages book by Gary Chapman. So I'll just refresh your memory, works of service, words of encouragement, physical touch, gift giving, and quality time. So whatever your spouse does for you to show his or her love and appreciation is how they like feeling loved too. So if you have a gift giver, every once in a while, even if you're not a gift giver, just throw a little gift at your spouse. My husband was reminding me one night that he's like, my love language is physical touch, and, sort of wink, wink. So I took my cold hand and I stuck it on his thigh. And he said, never mind, let's switch to words of encouragement until you warm up. So remember that the classic definition of love is to will the good of the other person, even if it's not what you want. Love is sacrifice, as you know. So every once in a while, even if you want to watch Die Hard 4 and your husband wants to watch The Great British Bake Off, then watch The Great British Bake Off that night. And you can watch Bruce Willis blow things up another night. And whoever wants whatever it is more should have it. So if you're like, I really want to watch this, but you can tell that your husband really, really wants to watch that, then give in to whoever wants it more. You don't want to be one of those people who always has to have their own way. People who might like start an argument just for the sake of winning, those people are very difficult to live with. I think that they're called lawyers. So do not be like that. I apologize if anyone's a lawyer. All right, so you know that phrase, do not let the sun set on your anger, or don't go to bed angry? I say that is hogwash. I do not ascribe to that at all. The reason being, I have noticed that people get cranky and crabby for one of two reasons, either because they're tired or because they're hungry. For me, it's when I'm tired, and for my husband, it's when he's hungry. So if you ever need to have a discussion, I'm saying discussion in quotes because I don't want to say the F word, fight. I should clarify what I mean by that F word. So make sure that you do it at a time when you're both well rested and well fed. So you've got your bases covered, that this is going to go as well as it possibly can. If it's nighttime and you're having a discussion, I recommend you don't try to stay up and work it out, because if you're tired, you're going to be yelling, you're not going to be thinking so clearly, it's not going to go as well as it will if you wait until morning. You know how sometimes if you have to write an angry email to a coworker or whatever, and you draft it at night and then you sleep on it and you look at it again in the morning and you're like, oh wow, like I need to cut that out, like that I could be a little less harsh. Well, the same thing happens with our spouse, and you love your spouse more than anybody else, so you don't want to have that nastiness come out at night. Wait until morning. Deal with it later when you're both in a better mood, and things will go so much better and so much quicker. It's also a great idea if you can couch that discussion in such a way that you're kind of blaming yourself along with it, just to ease. You might be like, we both could probably do a better job of keeping the kitchen clean. It's getting a little messy in here. And you may know full well that it's your spouse who's the slobby one who's making a mess in the kitchen, but he'll know it too, or she. But just say it nicely, and then it comes off much better. Don't ever yell. If your spouse is yelling, try not to yell also, because if you're yelling, he or she will yell, and then you're trying to yell over each other. But if one of you is remaining calm and the other person is yelling, they're soon going to realize, oh, I kind of feel stupid now. So they'll bring it back down and not yell. Don't name call. It's useless. It's childish. It's hurtful. Don't say absolutes like you always do this or you never do that, because absolutes are always wrong. That was a joke. Okay, it's too early. Thank you. Okay, yeah. And also just listen. Sometimes you just need to listen. Of course, you're not supposed to interrupt each other, and sometimes that is very difficult. To this day, I'm still just like, and my husband looks at me, and I'm like, okay, right, shh. Let them say their piece. Even if you don't agree, that's totally fine. Just acknowledge that you understand what they're saying. If you don't, ask clarifying questions, and then say, thank you for telling me. I'm going to take some time to think about it. It's totally fine to walk away. If you need to blow off some steam, go to your room, do some push-ups, do some sit-ups. You'll have the added bonus of having done exercise. Another thing that helps us calm down is to touch each other. Maybe you don't want to touch your spouse, so hug your child, hug the dog, pet the cat. Sometimes elementary school teachers will have a teddy bear in the room, so when a child is upset, they can hug the teddy bear. Even as adults, if we can hug something, it helps us calm down. If you hug somebody, or afterward when you've made up with your spouse, if you kiss your spouse, everything is good again, hold that kiss for at least 6 seconds. Because studies have shown that 6 seconds is how long it takes for the oxytocin to be released in your brain to let you know that everything is okay again. So give your spouse a long, lingering smooch. Also, singing. When you're stuck in a rut of negative thought and you can't get over it, singing helps connect the other side of your brain. And so your brain, both sides of your brain are activated, and it helps kick you out of that negative thought pattern. I saw a fortune cookie that said, when in anger, sing the alphabet. So even Confucius knew that singing was helpful. I have friends who, when they need to have an argument, they'll sing their arguments. I also have friends who talk to each other in British accents when they're upset with each other, because the ridiculousness of it kind of brings the tension down. It also helps when your spouse has a sense of humor. Something that my husband would always do when he wanted our kids to stop doing something is he would say, stop, 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 stop. And that was annoying me. So eventually I said, you really don't have to say stop 4 or 5 times. Just saying stop once, especially when you use the dad voice, is enough. So ladies, remember, boys especially respond well to lower octave voices. So if you lower your voice, then they're like, whoa, they listen up. So when I told my husband, you don't have to say stop, stop, stop. Like, it's kind of annoying me. One stop will do. And he said, okay. I was like, I am so fortunate. I love that my husband is funny. Just keep in mind that winning is for losers. You don't have to win every argument. Giving in is showing your spouse that you love them. Saying you're sorry can be difficult, which is kind of crazy, but it is difficult for us. And the reason why it's crazy is because those words carry so much weight. They mean so much to the other person. Sometimes you might hear, love is never having to say you're sorry. That's ridiculous. You still need to keep saying you're sorry. Or it'll be, love is never having to say, I love you anymore. That's also ridiculous. Of course, you need to keep saying that. And thank you. Still say thank you. Don't take anything for granted. Even if you know he's going to take the trash out, he takes the trash out every week, you still say thank you for the things that they do. Keep in mind also that occasionally your spouse is going to have an off day and do something out of character, like say something kind of nasty and hurtful. Just remind yourself that we all have bad days. And if your spouse says something that's not kind, just think of that as the time when you're taking a picture when your spouse is sneezing. That picture never comes out well. That's not who that person really is. So throw that incident like you would throw that picture away and just let that go. There's this priest in San Diego who always says KYMS, which stands for keep your mouth shut. If you have something snappy that you want to say to your spouse, wait 10 seconds. Just like that rule, if you're angry, count to 10. Wait 10 seconds and your impulse to say it will dissipate. And if it doesn't by 10, then give it another 10. Because no good will come from saying something. But we are human and we do sometimes snap and lash out. So count to 10, count to 20, and that impulse will die down. Marriage has good times and bad times. If you're going through a rough patch, just keep in mind that this is one of the bad times, and you will get through it. Low-level tension in your marriage is totally normal. Don't ever think that just because things aren't going well, that maybe you marry the wrong person. That is within the bounds of a normal marriage. Stick with it, and you will be all right. Adopt the motto, setbacks are inevitable, but failure is unthinkable. I was out to gelato with a friend, and somehow we got onto the topic of, would you get remarried if your spouse died? And she said, I can't imagine training another man to put up with all of the things that my husband has to put up with. She's like, nobody can love me and all of my faults and failings the way that this man can. So keep that in mind too. You want to keep this person around. Use the generosity gauge rather than the fairness filter. It's not about what has he done for me lately, or does he deserve this, or does she deserve me to do this for it, or do I owe this person to do this for him or her. It's not about keeping a score or a tally chart. So use the generosity gauge again, not the fairness filter. Marriage is about giving 100%. It's not 50% you do and 50% I do. It's you both try for 100%. I had an idea to make this little 365-day dust calendar where you flip it over and each day has a different cute thing that you can do for your spouse. It didn't come to fruition, but I had gotten all these ideas from all these wonderful people. One husband said that when he scrapes off the ice on his wife's car in the morning, he leaves a little heart in the corner, which I thought was really cute. A wife says that she applies lipstick and then she puts a kiss in his side mirror of his car. My husband will warm up my side of the bed for me. Probably a lot of guys do that. I think that that's wonderful. Another husband will put his wife's towel in the dryer when she's taking a shower so that when she comes out of the shower, she's got this nice fluffy warm towel. I should totally tell my husband to do that one. Another guy said, if your wife is upset, hug her. If that doesn't work, retreat to a safe distance and throw chocolate at her. I feel like I would use that to my advantage and say, I'm really upset. What is this, Hershey's? Give me the Godiva. I'm really upset here. Let's step it up. One woman says that she makes sure she has a glass of Jack Daniels at the ready when her husband is paying the bills. It's very practical of her. Another one said, laugh at your spouse's jokes even if they're not funny. Unfortunately, I think it was my husband who contributed that one. Less funny but more practical is, as you lie in bed at night, do an examination of conscience for your marriage. Like you do an examination of conscience before confession, do one for your marriage. Think to yourself, how did I do today? Was I loving? Was I attentive? Was I appreciative? What can I do better tomorrow? What is something special that I can do for my spouse tomorrow? Make that a practice of your nightly routine as you're laying in bed. And just keep in mind that if you love your children, and I assume that you do, then the greatest gift that you can give to your children is loving your spouse. Thank you very much. Where's your daughter? Did she leave? I was going to have her grab my other books, if you don't mind, just so that I can show these lovely people, in case you're interested. So 101 Tips for a Happier Marriage was the first book that I wrote with my boss, Jennifer Roback Morse of the Ruth Institute. Have you ever heard of that? Okay, it's fantastic. Go to ruthinstitute.com to learn more about that. Basically what it is everything that has gone wrong in society from the sexual revolution. She chronicles all of the crazy mess that we're in and talks about that. So this is, thank you. This has had lots of foreign translations, including Poland. My book was on a daytime talk show in Poland, which is pretty much the pinnacle of my career. It doesn't get any cooler than that. Although I was on EWTN, so that was also pretty neat. So talking about this book, and then the follow-up book was 101 Tips for Marrying the Right Person, which I spoke about last night to the youth group and the young adult group. If you're thinking ahead, if you have teenagers and you want them to have the best shot ever, or nieces or nephews, this book is good if you're someone you know is getting married and you want to slip it into their gift bag just to give them the best foot forward. And then, of course, this one that I already mentioned for all the things that I wish that I knew when I was a younger parent. Like letting go. That was another big thing. Letting go of the mess, because it's just what's going to happen. And then finally, in case you're like, I don't want nonfiction, I want it to disappear into a good book, escape into a good book, although disappearing makes sense for this. This is my first novel. I published it as Ilsa Ray just to keep it separate from my nonfiction books. It's about a girl whose genius best friend turns her invisible to avoid being kidnapped alongside her, and then she has 1 week to find him for the antidote, otherwise she'll be invisible forever, which could lead to insanity and death. So she follows clues left behind, and the bad guys are after her next, because if they can't get the formula from her friend's brain, they can extract it from her veins. So they set traps for her, and it's very suspenseful, and it's a mystery, and there's humor and romance and all of the things. So if you just want to like chill, in the evening for an hour and be swept away elsewhere, away from your family, then this is a good one too, okay? So that is what I have brought, and I'll go in the back, and if anybody wants to talk to me or check out a book, that's where I'll be. Okay, thank you so much.
If you're in the market to buy or sell your home or office, but want to use a realtor who supports your pro-life values, you can rest easy when you select a realtor from Real Estate for Life. They are a worldwide network of pro-life real estate agents who will help you buy or sell your property. And the best part is, they'll donate a portion of the sale to a charity, like the Ruth Institute, at no extra cost to you. Find your local pro-life realtor at realestateforlife.org. And remember, select the Ruth Institute as your charity of choice.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, Ruth Out and About, where you will find all interviews with the Ruth Institute.